I went to school at Indiana State University in Terre Haute. I grew up 30 miles west of Terre Haute.
IU.
Pardon?
IU.
Well, that's where the smart people went, you know. Larry Bird and I went to Indiana State. You know. Larry Bird is a great basketball player. Yes, so. And the thing Terre Haute was known for in the early part of last century, and in fact up into the 70s, was gambling and prostitution. And the local historical society in the 80s started collecting oral histories from, you know, notable people in the community. And I was looking up the Vigo County Oral History Project. And I was looking it up online once, and they had an oral history of a madam who ran a house of prostitution. And it was fascinating reading. The transcript ran for like 95 pages, and she never talked about sex. But she talked about all these colorful people, and I read it and I said, you know, there's a couple of songs in this thing. And I started recording a CD, and the guy who was producing it said, I was going to just do like a 6-song EP. And he said, you know, you need to write more songs. So I said, easy for you to say. And so I wrote some more songs and came up with a full CD, the title of which is There Are No Secrets in This Town. And one of the things that the woman talked about, the interviewer asked her, you know, what type of problems they would have with customers. And she talked about how, you know, the cops would come raid the place and then they'd be back in business like the next week until they paid off the right policeman or whatever. But she said one of the problems was sometimes, you know, a man would fall in love with one of the women. And she talked about one woman who had, and I didn't even change the name for the song, she had the improbable name of Alice Goodnight. But she talked about how Alice would go down to the local bars, and she wore, back in the 1950s, there was a famous shoemaker in New York. He made a lot of shoes for Broadway by the name of Isaac Miller. And he decided he was going to start making shoes, you know, for the general public, you know, fashion shoes. And it was a line of shoes known as I. Miller. And he hired this young art student, actually Carnegie Mellon, where my wife went to work, this young art student to do the artwork for his ads, and the art student's name was Andy Warhol. This was before he became Andy Warhol. And they became a big thing, and the madam in the transcript talked about how, you know, the women, this woman, Alice, really liked her I. Miller shoes, and she'd go around, you know, wearing her I. Miller shoes all the time. So this is a song about her and Pete, who was from Paris, Illinois, which is just west of Terre Haute. So it's kind of made up, but it's kind of real. I haven't heard from any of Alice's relatives, so I don't know if they like the song or not. It's called Red Eye Miller Shoes. Pete came from Paris, the one in Illinois. He owned a business and had a wife, 2 daughters and a boy. But he had a darkness, like his life had blown a fuse. He fell for Alice Goodnight in her red-eye Miller shoes. Climbed in his Plymouth Fury after dinner and left home. Fled through failing light east of Terre Haute. Hit the red light district with a plan to beat his blues, and there he fell for Alice Goodnight in her red-eye Miller shoes. Alice came from nothing, and it's where she would return. Every dollar that she had came from $10 she had earned. She spent it on kimonos, 7 Winds perfume and booze, and of course that pair of red-eye Miller shoes. Some men fall in love and promise the moon. Pete was no exception, no, he was not immune. There are temptations some men can't refuse, and for Pete it was Alice Goodnight in her red-eye Miller shoes. Now Pete lost perspective, he spent too much time away. His wife grew suspicious, so she followed him one day. Caught him in the one sin she could not excuse, and with her alimony bought some red-eye Miller shoes.